In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
Joe had huge problems with the IRS.
I knew it was coming. I hadn't filed taxes since 1990.
All the IRS letters coming in added up to a nightmare.
To get up to like $68,000. My heart started beating fast. It's like, there's no way, man. I mean, I ain't going to be able to do this.
Then they stopped his paycheck.
So that's when I started making phone calls and found U.S. Tax Shield.
U.S. Tax Shield went to work immediately.
They just took the bull by the horns. What blew my mind is he called the IRS right then and there.
So why is U.S. Tax Shield A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau? Joe knows.
They expect me a ridiculous amount of money.
If you owe more than $10,000 to the IRS or state, choose the company Joe chose, U.S. Tax Shield.
It was the best decision I made. U.S. Tax Shield is the way to go. Life is good. Thank you, Lord.
Call 800-471-3287.
U.S. Tax Shield. Boo-rah. Yes.
800-471-3287. 800-471-3287.
K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we're expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level, or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at advertise@k98talk.org. K98talk.com, a leader in internet radio. So grab your seatbelts and take the ride of your life on K98talk.com.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Here's Graceland with Jennifer Meadows.
The racial problems began back in September when students protested unfair conditions for minorities. Now, this was followed by a few more incidents, one involving a Confederate flag, but you know what? I think pretty minor infractions on the whole. But you know what? My question is, what happened to civility? What has happened to free speech and freedom to have a differing opinion on campus? Do we really want to resort to mob rule? And is this what tolerance and justice looks like? Because you know what? It looks pretty damn intolerant to me, making demands and using force. And I say, this is not freedom. But you're listening to Graceland on WNJC 1360 AM. I'm Jennifer Meadows here with author and journalist Kevin Fobbs. Now, Ben Johnson is our guest on the show today, and he's the U.S. Bureau Chief for LifeSite News. And Charles Albert Johnson III will join us at the bottom of the hour. But right now, Kevin Fobbs joins the program. And Kevin, you know what? It's pretty disconcerting what's happening at the University of Missouri. These students are going about these protests, I think, in the wrong way.
Well, I looked at least some of their demands, and I looked at the situation actually that goes back to the spring of this year. And I have to say that what we see reported in the news oftentimes is not exactly like they say the whole story. And I also take a look at some of the questions that have come up raised by the students, and whether or not the questions themselves and the challenges to the university president could have been dealt with a lot easier and a lot quicker with, I think, less confrontation on campus than what we saw with the president's resignation today.
I think so. I mean, like I said, pretty minor infractions. So it seems like this is kind of overkill in a big way. But I was very disappointed, Kevin, to wake up today and see that the president has already resigned, just caving into pressure just like that. And I think it certainly sends a wrong message, I think, to students.
Well, I think that, again, going back to the original point that I was making, and that is whether or not the situation, especially some of these incidents, which are they're not minor incidents in terms of what happened to some of these students, and especially a swastika painted in a dorm room or in a dorm hallway with feces. I think that's pretty serious. The question really is whether or not that in and of itself, and even the collection of some of these other matters, were enough to say that this president should have resigned or even should have been asked to resign. I think I take those questions and those challenges seriously because I was in student government at Eastern Michigan, and I also was the managing editor of the newspaper, and we dealt with a lot of these kinds of issues, but it never rose to, I think, this kind of challenge. And I think some of these issues and some of these challenges on the university campus in Missouri and what we saw also, I think, at Yale University are probably part of this comes from the Ferguson effect. I think that's really what I see happening. It's not that they aren't serious, but I think it gives rise to some false narratives that have been coming up on campus, which ordinarily would not be as serious or taken as seriously as we've seen on the campus in Missouri.
Now that, I don't really agree with you. So I think you bring up a good point there, the Ferguson effect. And I think everybody's so sensitive about racial issues right now with all that has happened in the past year or two. So, and we will revisit this discussion at the bottom of the hour with Charles Albert Johnson III. But right now our guest is with us. Ben Johnson is here. And Ben is the U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News. And Ben, glad to have you join us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Well, our guest is Ben Johnson, who is the U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News. He's the author of 3 books and also was the managing editor for Front Page Magazine from 2003 through 2010. Ben is also a regular guest on American Family Radio. It's kind of out there in my neck of the woods there, Ben. Glad you could join Kevin and I today. And we are talking about the abortion industry and specifically about the secrecy within the industry itself. You know, they really don't want people to know about procedures and practices. And you know what, Ben, not to ask a stupid question, but why all the secrecy? You know, they're killing the unborn, and with all this talk about pro-choice, you know, seem like they'd be proud of some of this.
Well, it tells you a lot when those who perform abortions tell you that they have to cover up what they do in order to protect the pro-choice movement. I certainly have my theories about why they wouldn't want to be forthcoming about some of the aspects of what they do. We can see that particularly with the undercover Planned Parenthood videos, where they talk about just one gruesome aspect of the abortion industry, the harvesting and selling of fetal organs and tissue for profit to medical researchers. But I could certainly expound upon it, but I think it's better to take their words for it. Dr. Lisa Harris is an abortionist, second-term abortionist, also a professor of obstetrics at the University of Michigan, also a professor of women's studies at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. She was recorded undercover by the Center for Medical Progress at the National Abortion Federation's annual meeting last year, where she said, "We often don't speak up, number one, because they're afraid of what she calls stigma. Number two, because she says they're afraid of being targeted with violence. But most importantly, she says, number three, they don't tell other people what they do because," and this is a quote now, "we want to protect the pro-choice movement." She says that our actual day-to-day experiences have no place in pro-choice rhetoric. And she goes on to discuss in some rather gruesome detail about women who hemorrhage and botched abortions, children who cannot be evacuated from the birth canal, other very gruesome things that she discusses. And that tells you why she does not want the public to know this. What that tells you is pro-choice rhetoric is so divorced from the reality of abortion that they cannot sell you this product, Planned Parenthood's top-grossing product, unless they lie to you about what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, and from reading your article, there was a video there, an undercover video that was during a National Abortion Federation meeting last year, where speakers are actually admitting, like you said there, Ben, that they're having to lie to protect the movement, and she's talking about the pro-choice movement. It's like, it's so simple, you know, Ben, it's a choice. But what we're actually doing is we're killing the unborn, and we're getting so divorced from the facts and reality, like you said there, Ben. You know, and I'm actually somewhat encouraged because we're seeing some attitudes beginning to shift on this issue about this industry, but also about abortion itself. And, you know, my question is, how has the news about all these undercover videos, you know, even going back to the Gosnell trial, and that was, I had to go back and look at that. That's been 2 years ago. Seems like it's been a bit longer ago. That was in Philadelphia. You remember Kermit Gosnell and the trial in Philadelphia 2 years ago. But we're starting to really see this industry for the ugly reality that it is. Have people's attitudes and minds, are they changing on this issue?
They are when people have the information. And again, I think that's really where Dr. Lisa Harris and her quotation, her admission, comes to the fore. And that is that among those who were polled, a recent poll was conducted among those who saw the videos, they were significantly more likely to want to defund Planned Parenthood, to say that they believe that abortion is a process that is gruesome and that takes a human life, which is also something that Dr. Lisa Harris says on another video. She said, we should admit that what we're doing is violence, it's a person, it's killing, and again, this is a quotation, it's violence, it's a person, it's killing, but then we should ask, why is this the most important thing I can do with my life? It's a very chilling quotation from her. When people see the undercover videos, polls show they are significantly more likely to want to defund Planned Parenthood, more likely to describe themselves as pro-choice, but only 40% of Americans have seen or heard about the videos. The major three networks have devoted all of 1 minute, 13 seconds to the coverage. And when you look at CNN, for example, they're more interested in whether one still from a shot that was referenced by Carly Fiorina, it was filmed within a Planned Parenthood, or if it's another abortion that depicts the exact same thing, but it was filmed somewhere else. And they've made that the focus of their animus and their outrage, rather than the fact of what it depicts in the reality of an aborted child.
Ben, I have a question, and it goes to a point you just made, and that is that the major media, mainstream media, not paying enough attention to the videos or even coverage of what happened, these despicable videos. So how can an average American anywhere in this nation find out this kind of information, at number one, and number two, be able to put pressure on local officials at the local level to deal with this issue, as well as putting pressure on Congress, because Congress is not going to do anything. They tried in this last try, as we can say, quote, in terms of trying, but I think it has to really come from the local level in order to put real pressure and real attention on this issue, because otherwise it's going to disappear like a lot of other issues.
Well, I think you're right. The congressional investigation, the Select Committee, which was just named, initially instigated by John Boehner, and then the members were named by Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi. That investigation is going to continue. I think it's going to be partisan gridlock. Trying to defund Planned Parenthood, there may be some writer's edge to the reconciliation bill, but I think probably because of the presidential election, very little will be done legislatively. That tends to be the course. When people need information, they need to tune into programs like this. They need to go into the alternative media. The mainstream media, unfortunately, we see have their own agenda, and whatever stories fit the preconceived, prefabricated template that they believe in, they lead with that, even if the facts don't fit the reality, as we saw with, for example, the Dr. Ben Carson story just recently. So when the media have a narrative, they'll advance the narrative, even if the facts don't fit it. You need to get into the alternative media, shows like this, websites like LifeSite News and others that cover the reality from things from a perspective they may find more in keeping with their own. And then when it comes to pressuring local media, and local citizens, I should say, local media often will cover these stories. It was one local paper in the Philadelphia area that did such a good job of covering Kermit Gosnell, and that got the attention of Kirsten Powers, and that finally shamed the mainstream media into giving some coverage. So pressuring local media to cover it is very important, and then building relationships, particularly with prosecutors and with state health officials, particularly in friendly states. Unfortunately, the administration in Pennsylvania right now is not very friendly, but in other states where prosecutors may be more predisposed to carry out the law and enforce laws that are already on the books, and everyone, regardless of where you are on the abortion decision, you should understand and agree the laws on the books should be enforced and women's health and safety should be protected.
Getting to that point about protecting women's health, Texas actually defunded Planned Parenthood. And
Kevin, if I could just stop you right there before we get into another question. And when we come back, Kevin, I'm going to toss it back to you and let you ask your question, and we'll let Ben answer. But Ben Johnson, U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News, is talking about the deception that is inherent in the abortion industry and the changing attitudes about abortion on the part of many Americans. More on this topic coming up next.
Hi, this is Ronnie Wood of the Stones for Rad. You know it's okay to rock and roll and party, because I do it all the time. Just let someone else do the driving. That's what I do. Remember, rock lives, and you should too. Please don't drink and drive.
A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
So, I'm a dog, and I just got adopted by this new human guy, and I'm starting to wonder how he got along without me. I mean, okay, something as simple as walking around the block. He's got this leash thing, and he puts me on one end and him on the other, and I'm just taking him around. I think he's afraid of getting lost. Without that leash and me guiding him along, I don't think he'd find his way back home. But it's kind of cute.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hey, Billy.
Yeah?
Do you want to go to the state fair?
Yeah.
Do you want to ride the roller coaster?
Yeah.
The big one?
Yeah.
The one with the reverse flip?
Yeah.
Well, you can't.
Huh?
You see, Billy, when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have done with it. including going to the state fair.
Oh, man.
Cheer up. This year, your parents will make it right. They're going to visit EnergySavers.gov, where they'll get tips on how to save energy and money. Then they'll add extra insulation and get a few of those Energy Star appliances. They could save hundreds of dollars a year. And you know what, Billy?
What?
They'll take you to the state fair next year.
But I want to go this year.
I know you do, Billy. I know you do. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Here's Graceland with Jennifer Meadows.
Well, thank you for listening to the program. You're listening to Graceland on Philadelphia's 1360 AM. I'm Jennifer Meadows with author and journalist Kevin Fobbs. And tonight we are talking to Ben Johnson, who is the U.S. Bureau Chief of LifeSite News. He's the author of 3 books and was the managing editor for Front Page Magazine from 2003 through to 2010. Ben is also a regular guest on American Family Radio. And I know, Kevin, you were just about to ask him another question right before we left for the break.
Right. Ben, I had a question about whether or not at the local level, states like Texas actually have hit upon, I believe, a solution to dealing with Planned Parenthood by actually going after their funding itself. And that's what the governor, Abbott, said. He said that he actually welcomed the lawsuits from Planned Parenthood that would come from that, because his goal was to defund Planned Parenthood, period. Cut off all of their funding. Isn't that probably one of the best ways that we at the local level can deal with this horrendous situation called abortion?
I believe in taking every opportunity that's presented to us, and the states, I think, are ripe for pro-life advances and pro-life victories. I think you're absolutely right when it comes to the funding, that at the national level, we certainly see a certain amount of gridlock that's going to be in place at least through 2017. And depending on who's elected, perhaps another 4 or 8 years after that. But when it comes to the state level, we have a workshop, what the founders intended to be 50 states, which can be a workshop for the rest of the country. I don't think they ever envisioned us funding abortion or the day that abortion would even be legal in the country. But here we have an opportunity in states like Texas, where they defunded Planned Parenthood, actually increased funding and increased the amount of providers who were available for women's health in the state of Texas, created their own federal program, separate from the federal Medicaid program. The Texas Women's Health Program has been a tremendous success and something that should be replicated not only for defunding Planned Parenthood, but also under the guise of states' rights and the importance of reclaiming constitutional authority under the 10th Amendment, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that if we go state by state, first of all, you can get investigations into local problems, and then secondly, you can get investigations, for example, into misuse of federal and state monies. Planned Parenthood, of course, in Texas had to admit that they made a settlement. I shouldn't say that they admitted. They made a settlement of $4.3 million in Medicaid fraud. They settled with the Obama administration as well as the state of Texas. So they've admitted, essentially by settling the case, that this was an issue with the way they were being funded. State by state, locality by locality, we can look into each aspect of what Planned Parenthood is doing in every single area. But until we take back the White House, this is going to continue to be an issue. In states that have defunded Planned Parenthood, for example, in Texas, the Obama administration simply took a federal grant and gave money back to Planned Parenthood in Texas, where it was missing this money. We know that President Obama, of course, has received millions upon millions of dollars from Planned Parenthood for his reelection bid. He has said, God bless Planned Parenthood. He said, Planned Parenthood will not yield and I will not yield. And he's holding the line. And it's sort of the circular cash flow where taxpayers give money through the federal government, through his Medicaid program, to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood overcharges the government for contraception and other services that it renders, sometimes by a factor of 13 times what it actually paid, and then they recycle that money to Democratic politicians' campaigns who then keep the cycle going. So it's sort of a large protection racket involving our money and very little accountability. And until that federal component's taken out, state by state is the only route that we have to go.
Now, and you brought up a good point there because, I know Texas had voted to defund. What other states have voted to defund Planned Parenthood?
Well, Texas has. The state, surprisingly, New Hampshire has voted from its executive council to defund Planned Parenthood in one instance. And in fact, the person who cast the vote was a pro-choice Republican.
Wow.
But nonetheless, he said that I cannot, after what I've seen on those videos, I couldn't humanly continue to fund this organization. At a minimum, we have to get to the bottom of these allegations. They are certainly trying to defund Planned Parenthood in Ohio and Florida, and Governor Kasich and Governor Rick Scott are proving to be somewhat more difficult to deal with in those areas. So if you have listeners in those areas, I hope that they'll step up and put some pressure on, particularly if you have some listeners in the Florida Panhandle and throughout Ohio. They can step up. But in states where Republicans are in the majority, which is, I think, 38 states after last Tuesday, if I'm not wrong, I think 38 states have Republican majorities either in Congress or they have governors who are Republican, and most of them would presumably be pro-life and probably campaigned on this issue. And now it's up to us as grassroots voters, grassroots citizens, to do our duty of citizenship and hold them accountable to the promises that they made on the campaign trail.
I'm telling you, because this is an issue that people are very emotional about. And I know you mentioned a story actually in your article from about a week ago. And I remember hearing about this. It was about Oregon and an energy plant from 2014, actually sounding like something out of a horror movie, I'm telling you. Talking about how this energy plant was using fetuses to, basically, I guess, incinerate these in an energy plant in Oregon. What can you tell us? What are some of the details about this, and how did this story come to light? Because it's an incredible and just shows how we are not respecting and valuing life. It's pretty horrific.
Well, it really is. This story came to light last April from my colleague Steve Weatherby. He was working at a Catholic publication in British Columbia, and because of this story, we actually hired him at LifeSide News. But he was able to find out that after an abortion, the child doesn't just magically disappear. The body has to be disposed of, which is, of course, what these undercover videos are showing. To the extent that buyers are willing to experiment with those parts, they will sell them. But that only takes place in a few states. These babies' bodies have to be disposed of in some way. And what they found out was in Canada, particularly in British Columbia, but probably not limited to the province of British Columbia, they were trucking these to Portland, Oregon, to what is a waste disposal and energy plant. And as it turns out, this biohazardous material was being burned for energy in Oregon.
Gosh.
So they were burning babies' bodies in order to keep the electricity flowing in Oregon. On these undercover videos, one that had been leaked from the National Abortion Federation meeting last year, an abortionist in Michigan was saying, we don't know how to get rid of the children that we're aborting. We don't know how to dispose of the bodies. And when someone mentioned this, someone who was there from British Columbia at a hospital who was dealing with this, when the story first broke, she said, Renee Chelian is the name of the lady from Michigan. She said, that sounds like a really great solution. It sounds like a fantastic idea.
Just awful. I mean, you think about that. That is human life. And yet, my God, if I was around this, it's a terrible story in and of itself, but I was in around this energy plant in Oregon. Just think about that. So you're basically using as energy, human life, aborted bodies. My God, it sounds like something out of a horror film, Kevin.
It does. And, what is frightening about all of this, and I believe firmly in solutions. And, Ben, I'm chairman of the American Christian Civil Rights Movement. And the thing that is really important to me that would help, I believe, end abortion itself is the Personhood Amendment. I would ask you, Ben, how do you feel about personhood for babies and the unborn. Is that one of the tools that we could use in order to actually begin to deal with birth and human dignity at conception?
Well, it's certainly one of the tools that's been introduced and has seen tremendous support throughout the country. You've seen that the Personhood Amendment essentially went from 0 to 60 within a very short period of its introduction. Keith Mason introduced this, and others out in Colorado, I should say. Mm-hmm. And this movement has spread throughout the country. The issue with its adoption, there are some practical issues, perhaps, but I think that the issue of personhood of the unborn child is what has to lie at the heart of our respect for human life. I think that as part of our respect for unborn children, it has to be rooted in the fact, I understand probably the three of us on the call are believers, many of your listeners are believers. We believe every child is created in the image of God, and therefore no one can take a life except for God. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I kill and I make alive. Those who are not believers, as I was not a believer when I became pro-life, can look at the science. Embryology teaches very clearly that life begins at conception. Marco Rubio was right when he said that. And when you're dealing with a living human being, separate and distinct from the mother, separate and distinct from the father, its own set of DNA, that child has all the human rights that accrue to any human being under, whether you're citing the United Nations Human Rights Declarations or whether you're looking at the 14th Amendment, which I believe already grants personhood to all unborn children. And by the way, so did the author of Roe versus Wade, Harry Blackmun. He had said if this is an unborn child, if the unborn child is a human being, then the 14th Amendment protects that child in all instances. So Mike Huckabee, for example, has said if he's elected president, which is perhaps more a distant reality than likely, but if he or another pro-life president is elected, they could simply enforce the 14th Amendment from the executive branch, the way that the Obama administration has ignored so much of the Constitution. With personhood, I think we have to make that the cornerstone, the recognition that this is a separate human being. This human being, because it's another life, deserves all the rights that accrue under the 14th Amendment, under the U.S. Constitution, and in its status as a child of God.
Well, and Ben, I am, like I said a minute ago, a bit encouraged, despite some of this horrific news and these videos that are coming out. At least it is exposing this industry for what it is, and I think the public, for once, is actually having to look at and see, the abortion industry for what it is. And I did go back and look at some statistics from the CDC, and I found something. It was actually from 2011, showing how many abortions we're having in this country annually. And you may have a more updated figure, but this was actually back from 2011. It said that there were 1.06 million abortions performed that year. It was actually down from 1.21 million from 2008, actually a decline of 13%. And I believe very likely that is because this message is starting to take hold and take root. Especially I'm seeing with millennials that attitudes are changing about this industry. And the truth is finally surfacing. So I think we can be happy and about that. And I would like to see a shifting of the guard from, the federal level, if we can win the presidency and start changing some of the funding of this. And I think we will see some difference on the local level. So, Ben, I am encouraged by that. But very quickly, Ben, I know we're just about out of time, and I'm so glad that you could be with us. But where can our listeners find you online and also your work?
Well, thank you very much, and I hope that we will let 1,000 flowers bloom, and hopefully this one of them will bring us victory in the pro-life movement. You can find out more at lifesitenews.com. That's where I'm U.S. Bureau Chief. I also have a private website, The Rights Writer, as in the Bill of Rights, therightswriter.com.
Excellent, Ben. And we so appreciate you coming on the show.
Yes,
and please come back and visit Kevin and us anytime, and keep up the good work.
Thank you,
thank
Ben.
you so much, and thank you for all your good work in Philadelphia.
Excellent, excellent. And you are listening to Graceland on 1360 AM, part of the Conservative Commandos radio network. Back in a moment.
It's Thursday night, and you're grabbing drinks with some friends. Started off with a pitcher for the table, which quickly becomes two. There's pool. And there's the photo booth.
All right, everybody squeeze in. Say cheese!
Followed naturally by an order of wings. And another.
Can we get some extra ranch sauce?
Then there's the ceremonial nightcap.
So what are we doing this weekend?
And lastly, it's back to the car, which, if you're buzzed, could be the most expensive night of your life. Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Nothing kills a buzz like getting pulled over for buzz driving, because buzz driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
I started going cold turkey. Well, at least when I'm in the car.
I know I shouldn't do it, but it's so hard to stop. That's why I hide it from myself, so I won't be tempted.
I used to do it all the time. I stopped by locking it in my glove compartment.
My friend used to do it way too much. Now I turn it off when we're in the car.
My solution is simple. I just don't do it.
There are lots of ways to stop yourself and others from texting and driving. How will you stop? Tell us at stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
So if the ties find ever do come loose, tie them in a knot like a hangman's noose. 'Cause I'll go to heaven or I'll go to hell before
Here's Graceland with Jennifer Meadows.
Well, this is Graceland on WNJC 1360 AM. I am Jennifer Meadows with author and journalist Kevin Fobbs and media personality Charles Albert Johnson III will be joining us momentarily. And, you know, Kevin, there's been so much in the news this past week about Ben Carson and the media. And there have been some inaccuracies that have been coming to light about Ben Carson's story, according to Politico. And we'll get into that in just a minute. But Dr. Carson admits some bit of fabricating about a scholarship to West Point, and also another story from his youth that he was a very troubled individual and tried to stab a friend. And before we get into this, actually, Kevin Fobbs is from Detroit and went to school with Ben Carson, and I believe it was high school, wasn't it, Kevin? And I wanted you to talk about what you knew of Ben Carson when you were in high school, and what you remember. What do you remember about Ben Carson?
Well, I did go to school with Ben. He was the commander of ROTC, both at Southwestern High, which is where I went, as well as the commander of ROTC for the entire city of Detroit. And I was a cadet. I came in as a private, and he was a colonel, full colonel. I can tell you very simply that Ben Carson, and I we'll talk about, quote, the fabrications that CNN and others have talked about, quote, alleged fabrications. But I can tell you that as a person, Ben Carson has the integrity now that he had actually when he was the commander. And the other thing that's important to understand about Ben Carson is that he is a quiet person. He is a very considered person, very intelligent as well. But I think it's important for our listeners to understand that the kind of person that the media is trying to portray him as a person who actually made up these incidents, or a person that lies about the incidents, or a person that actually is filled with falsehoods. That's not Ben Carson, and certainly it does not show very well or speak very well about the mainstream media, which has been working to perpetrate these kinds of falsehoods. This guy was a person who actually taught us as young cadets on how to conduct ourselves, how to defend this nation, how to be proud of this nation, and to have integrity for yourself and for those who you represent and for those you would be future leaders of. So this is the Ben Carson that I know, and this is the Ben Carson that I believe that millions of Americans are supporting. I have not taken any position in terms of this election, but I do know that a person who's touched by the hand of God, as Ben says he was, has shown that, and others are feeling that as well across this nation.
Well, and it's interesting because he seems like such a mild-tempered person, but yet we're hearing these stories about how he had all these anger issues, and he was very troubled as a youth. So, is this just Politico trying to pin all of that on Dr. Carson? Do you feel, Kevin?
Well,
and then I'm gonna pass it to you, Charles.
Well, I could tell you very simply. I've been doing national interviews about this for the last 2 weeks, almost straight, and it's CNN almost every single day, it seems. And even wrote an article about the coverage that CNN gave. I was interviewed in the article that CNN, and as well as what CNN did.
I saw that. It was right there on CNN. You were interviewed about his childhood. Yep.
Well, and NBC and others as well. And my point, I guess, in all of this is that the narrative that's out there, especially by Politico, where you can make up something and then call it truth. You can make up a lie, and it was a lie because there was nothing there in terms of the alleged feeling that we had as the 9 who were interviewed by CNN, saying that we thought that this was not really true. What I said and what others have said too is that when you have a quiet person, let's be logical about this. A person who has that kind of personality is not going to display it openly. That's the nature of who he is and who he was back then. So to say that 9 people said that they didn't see it, out of a couple thousand people that went to Southwestern, it still goes back to the same point. A quiet person is not going to display that. And when he said at the age of 14 that the hand of God touched him and he changed himself, well, that is what change is. That's what transition is. That's what happens when God enters your life. And I think that's the kind of person that Ben Carson is. And again, I go back to Politico has an agenda. And some of these reporters or some of these networks have an agenda. And they had it against others like Rick Santorum from Pennsylvania. He did exactly the same kind of thing to him as well. Again, attacking who he is. Mike Huckabee, again, attacking who he is as a minister and as a Christian. So we have to expect that. But I just refuse to just bear witness to a falsehood when I know that it's a falsehood, but because knowing this conduct and knowing this person.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask. And Charles, since you're there, I'm wondering, do you feel this is all just a bunch of media hype and nothing but a leftist media character assassination upon Dr. Carson?
Yes, definitely character assassination, the typical tactic of the left. But I do want to point out, Jennifer, that I am interested in the fact that they had to make this a scandal. Whether or not he said scholarship or not, almost like, well, depends on what your definition of is. Well, you know how we typically understand a scholarship when they pay for everything. Well, they weren't calling it a scholarship, but were they offering to pay for everything if you qualified and got the necessary recommendations? Of course. Could it have been a misunderstanding, mere semantics? Of course. But Politico will spin this, and it's cleverly written, by the way. It's written to make you think that he outright lied about something. And that is absolutely categorically untrue, a complete fabrication on the part of Politico. It has been debunked, but it is yet repeated by the liberal minions who will refuse to let go of this. But I'm interested in the fact that they have to make this a scandal. You know, it's not like when Herman Cain became the front runner back in 2012, and they had to, and then they trot all these strange women coming out of the woodwork, you know.
Right.
So the fact that they have to spin this into the mother of all scandals.
I know, it's huge. This is huge. It's mind-blowing. Yeah.
My God, this is getting more scrutiny than Hillary Clinton's Benghazi testimony in those hearings, which got scant media coverage outside of Fox News and the conservative media. But I'm here to tell you Dr. Carson's going to weather this storm. I had my reservations about Dr. Carson just simply because I think he's just such a nice guy.
Yes, he's so nice. I love him.
Can he really dig in and win a political brawl with the left? That was my reservation about Dr. Carson, but he's come out and really hit the media hard, and especially when he called them out on their inconsistency, how they were just totally uninterested in Barack Obama's history, the fact that his academic records have always been sealed. We don't even know what kind of grades he made. Talking about the word scholarship associated with Ben Carson, we don't even know anything about how Obama even got into Columbia with mediocre grades at Occidental. How does this work? Well, we don't know whether or not interested. And then you hear the reporter snap back and say, "Oh, well, he's already president." Like that. Like that's a point to be made in rebuttal. But look, Ben has shown me that he is able to get in here. He is able to roll up his sleeves and get down in here and fight for this thing. And it makes me think he really wants it.
Yeah, I agree with you about that, Charles. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you feel this is nothing but a character assassination by Politico, which is, it's a leftist media organization. So is that what's really going on here? Just nothing but another attack by leftist media.
Oh, not only is it another attack, it is actually a sinister attack, because here they know that they can read the tea leaves just like we can as well. We can see and they can see that Ben Carson in several national polls is beating Hillary Clinton. We can see that and they can see that. And they can project that if Ben Carson goes along, he's picking up steam in the South as well. If he follows that pathway and he ends up as the candidate for the Republican Party, there is a very good possibility that he could beat Hillary Clinton. We know that polls change, but right now the trajectory shows that. So it's incumbent upon the Democrat, DNC, National Committee, mainstream media machine try and demonize and take a person out, because what else? Just like Charles said, what else do you have? If this is all you have, then you don't really have anything. And I think that's really important for all of us to understand, because I can tell you, I've spoken to about 30 or 40 reporters over the last 2 weeks, and I say the same thing, that as a Christian, it's dangerous for people who are in the mainstream media. If they have a black man who's conservative and a Christian, that's like the trifecta that liberals dread.
It's true. Right. It's like every Democrat and every leftist's worst nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And they're going to turn up the heat. But I found it pretty fascinating that this weekend, first of all, we saw Ben come out with a little bit of that anger that you need in order to be, we call it righteous anger.
Righteous indignation.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, we need that.
And we saw he picked up $4 million, 80,000 new people, small donations, and he actually picked up 160,000 new supporters on Facebook. So it backfired. Against Politico.
Yeah, and Kevin, I want to ask you guys, both you and Charles as well, after the break, what you think the fallout will be for the Carson campaign. Is this going to work in his favor, or is this going to work against him? But real quickly, let's run to break. I am Jennifer Meadows on Philadelphia's 1360 AM with Kevin Fobbs and Charles Albert Johnson III. We will be back after this brief message.
Hey, we've all had computer problems. The question is, what then? You gonna take that little darling down to one of them big box stores and turn it over to some kid whose voice changed last week? He's got more stainless hardware in his face than a Smith & Wesson pistol? Hell no. That's like taking a lame horse in for a pedicure. Let's be honest. You've shared things with your computer you wouldn't have with your best friend. Now that's a special bond. And you need someone who understands that relationship, can bring her back good as new. You need Jaffrey Computer. I know that old boy who runs that place, and he's as good as gold and smarter than your 7th grade science teacher. Jaffrey Computers at jaffreycomputer.com. Trust no one else.
Hi, I'm Joe Perry. And Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, here for RAD, recording artists, actors, and athletes against drunk driving. Yeah, you know we love it when the music does the talking.
And you know, the music stops when someone gets killed.
So never let someone you know get behind the wheel if they've been drinking. So keep it real. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
You and your family are connected by routine, and you stick to it. But what if a disaster strikes without warning? What if your day's routine is disrupted and you can't reach your family? Have you planned for that? Before a disaster turns your family's world upside down, be ready. Get a kit. Make a plan. Be informed. Learn how at www.ready.gov. Brought to you by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Ad Council.
Every day is a fading sign. I get a little bit closer to feeling fine.
Here's Graceland with Jennifer Meadows.
We are listening to Graceland on 1360 AM, and I do want to welcome our listeners from the Oxford, Mississippi, and the Ole Miss community, and thank them, hottytoddy.com, for what they're doing for the program, featuring the show weekly. So I appreciate you very much for what you're doing. And we have been talking about Dr. Carson and the leftist media attack upon his campaign. Interesting, because it has brought in quite a landfall for the Carson campaign, $3.5 million last week alone.
That great windfall.
But I'm telling you, big time. But beside the money, does this help or hurt his campaign? And I'm going to toss it to you, Charles, and then to you, Kevin.
Well, it helps his campaign because it's helping him develop that thick skin he needs to deal with the media. We know he's a nice guy, but he's going to have to roll up his sleeves and really hit
in that New Hampshire moment where he grabbed that mic and said, "Mr. Green, I'm paying for this mic," and that actually set him apart from everyone else in the field.
Yeah,
it was a pretty crowded
Like
field.
that.
So I look at what happened to Ben Carson as that 1980 Reagan moment. And I think that's going to not just set him apart, but it's going to wake other people up about, like you said, Charles, about is he willing to fight for the nomination? This weekend, we saw a different kind of Ben Carson, a firmer, a steadier Ben Carson saying, I'm going to fight for this nomination and his conduct. And I think that it actually, again, backfired against Politico and the mainstream media. And Donald Trump, I think he's going to have a little bit more on his hands than he probably bargained for.
Yeah, and I think that's good. That's good for, the whole process, I believe. And so, guys, we're going to switch topics here, and we're going to see what continues to transpire there with this story with Dr. Carson. Maybe we'll follow up next week. But let's talk real quickly, because we don't have very much time, about what is happening. I talked about this in our opening tonight at the University of Missouri. Tim Wolf, the president, resigned because of this perceived racial bias. There's some issues. Obviously, there's some issues at the university, but should it have actually created a situation where he should have had to resign? I think to me that seems a bit drastic. But is this the way we're trying to address racism on campus? Is this the way we need to try to address racism on campus? Is it, myself, I'm just looking at these situations. It seems to me, I'm not certain. It seems a bit reactionary on the part of the president, but I don't know. I mean, Kevin, you said a few minutes ago that you thought that this was there were some real problems there. For me, it seemed like college campus, you've got a lot of different exchanges of ideas, but, I don't know. So I'm going to toss that to you, Kevin. Do you feel like this is the way we should be addressing racism?
Well, I don't think that you resign. I mean, that's admitting that you're guilty.
I know. It seems a bit drastic to me.
It is.
It's like he caved in, and it's like, I would have liked to have seen him stand up and say, and be a leader instead of just caving in and saying, okay, I resign today.
Well, here's my take on this, because we had a president who actually resigned from his office when I was on campus, and I was the managing editor or the editorial editor at the time. And I can tell you that what he should have done is that this is my plan. And this is my counter plan to your plan, and let's sit down and work out this over a 6 or 8 week period with benchmarks. That is how you do it. You just don't throw up your hands and say, well, I'm out of here. And I can probably tell you that the Board of Regents probably put pressure on him to do something like that, to resign. But I would have countered the Board of Regents if they did put that kind of pressure on him. I would have said, this is my plan. You got a 10-point plan. This is my 10-point plan. Let's sit down and work out this 10-point plan over the next 2 months and see where we are, and hopefully be able to have a conclusion to this turmoil that's on campus. But you don't just simply say, well, I'm out of here, and then drop the mic. Now that's a coward's way out.
I completely agree. It's just like he just caved into the pressure, Charles. I think this was he was being very reactionary on the part, and this has been going on. Actually, I didn't realize this has been going on for a couple of months, but it seems to be overkill on the part.
Well, look, I mean, look, the pressure was on him to resign. You had actual players on their college football team saying, we're not going to play until something happens here. You had a kid on a 10-day hunger strike. I mean, these things.
I know.
Look, these things were happening. The football players said, we're not going to even practice again until he eats something. I mean, literally. So when you have that kind of pressure coming from students, that kind of organization, you have to resign. I mean, it's what you have to do. You have to do it for the sake of the school. You have to do it for the reputation of the school, and because you didn't take decisive enough action on these issues when they were coming to you. And, college campuses have been dismissive about things like this, just like they've been dismissive about the rape issue going on campus. So, look, it's a hard pill to swallow, but, the president, he kind of made his own bed here. He has a lay in it.
Well, so now I was looking at the incidents that were cited, Kevin and Charles, and I'm looking over them and I'm seeing, okay, are these actual examples of racism, or was this just simply a difference of opinion, Charles and Kevin? To me, it seemed difference of opinion. You go back to 40 years ago, back in the 1960s, we had communists on campus. Now they've overrun and taken over the campuses and
right.
system.
Now they're in the classrooms teaching.
Exactly. But we allowed all of that back then. So now we I'm just wondering, it seems to me like these are just simply a difference of opinion, not necessarily issues of racism. And quickly, Charles, what do you think?
Listen, some of these situations may be a bit overblown, but it's all in your reaction. And I think that's where the president dropped the ball here. Your students have got to feel like you are reacting to their needs. That's the case with any president of anything, with any executive, with the head coach of a football team, with the president of the United States, with the president of a university. If the people don't feel like you're reacting to their needs, then you just got to go. It's just that kind of job.
No, I will agree with you. I mean, I think he probably did not respond well, and I certainly saw that. But Kevin, what do you think? I mean, was this actual incidents of racism, or did you feel that this was just simply differences of opinion?
No, because there's a difference between opinion and conduct. What the students were talking about in large part was conduct by the president, conduct by some of the people who actually work there, including the police or the police for the university, and so on. So they were talking about conduct, and so it's not a difference of what they think and what the president thinks, but they were talking about actual things that actually happened. And I think the president, I agree with Charles, the president again, and we didn't see the any kind of 10-point plan, except that he just ignored them. I think that was his plan, I guess. And,
right.
Wish they were way into the cornfield or something. I don't know. But I think that, so here's the issue, that if he had put a plan out there, as you said, Charles, early enough, then they could have had something to deal with and negotiate over. But without that, it's a vacuum. And that vacuum is where we saw the students actually rise up and say that we want another leader, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and in that regard, I think, certainly was warranted. But I do wonder, where is free speech on college campuses and university campuses across America? And I wish we had time to get into that, but we're just about out of time. So, Kevin, just wanted to say very quickly that we appreciate our audience tuning in to the program. And please tell our listeners where they can find you and also your writing as well, Kevin.
Okay, you can find me at communitiesdigitalnews.com. That's communitiesdigitalnews.com. Or you can find me at AmericanChristianCivilRightsMovement.com.
There you are. And Charles, you as well.
Yes, you can find me on Facebook, Charles Albert Johnson III, my whole name. You can also find me on Twitter at Sons, SONZ, Sons of Liberty 76.
And you can find me out on Twitter. It's JM Graceland. And also on Facebook, it's Jennifer Meadows in Memphis, Tennessee. And thanks again, Philadelphia, for listening. Take care. God bless. And until next week, good night, folks.
When our water heater broke down last month, it was a nightmare. It took 5 hours for the plumber to show up, and he charged us a couple of $100 to come out. And then it cost another $1,800 to put in the new water heater. By the time it was all said and done, I felt like I'd been taken. But what else could I do?
The smartest thing you can do is get a home warranty from American Residential Warranty. Their home warranties pay to repair or replace all your major appliances when they break, and they will break, and at the worst possible time. Call American Residential Warranty right now for free information on home warranties starting at just pennies a day. Don't wait for your refrigerator to stop running or your ceiling fans to stop turning. Call American Residential Warranty right now. Ask how you can save up to 50% on washer and dryer coverage. Just call 1-800-513-6154. That's 1-800-513-6154. Again, 1-800-513-6154. Call now.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 1-800-516-7602 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 1-800-516-7602 to take your call right now. Call 1-800-516-7602. That's 1-800-516-7602. Again, 1-800-516-7602.